Order the December 5th, 2018 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Roll call, please.
Barbie, Buckley, Castro,
Here.
Klein,
Here.
Maxwell,
Here.
Wright, Chair Doe.
Here.
4 present.
Approval of the agenda. Is there any additions, deletions, or corrections? And if none, I'll take a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
So moved by Castro, seconded by Maxwell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Approval of the October 17th, 2018 minutes. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? And if none, I'll take a motion.
I move to approve the minutes of October 17, 2018.
Second.
So moved by Castro, seconded by Maxwell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
I'll abstain since I wasn't a member at that time.
And the November 7th, 2018 meeting minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of November 7th, 2018.
Approved by Castro.
Second.
Second by Maxwell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Abstain again.
Did everybody vote on that last motion?
Ron abstained.
We'll just check. We'll check on the voting if we need 4 for approval.
Okay. And if so, we'll
If
bring it
not,
back to the
then we'll
next
bring them
meeting.
back. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks. This is the public participation portion of the meeting where we give the public an opportunity to speak on anything not on the record. I'm going to make note that we have 2 individuals here. However, they are not that you're not part of the public. I just realized that was going to come out weird. But we do not have any public participants here this evening. So we will move on to new business. We have an item up for discussion, the city website redesign.
Yes, we have 2 items tonight, no hearings, both items for discussion. The first is a discussion regarding the city website design. The city is undergoing a process to redesign the website, and the IT department, city manager's office, is soliciting feedback from the community, and also they want to get feedback from the various boards and commissions of the city. So they asked for some time tonight to do a short presentation on their on the website, and hopefully get some feedback from the commission if you choose to do that. So we have IT Director Mark Thorson here, and also Jason Blumenthal. He's our management intern with the city manager's office, and they'll be presenting tonight. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you very much for having us here and allowing us to talk about this. We are, the city of DeKalb is in year 4 of a 5-year agreement. We're about to start year 4 this coming in 2019 with in an agreement with Civic Plus, who is our website host. Now, some background on Civic Plus: they are a municipal specific website developer. So a lot of the features and function of the website is designed specifically for municipalities and other type of governmental organizations. In addition to that, in February of 2019, we're entitled to a free refresh, meaning they will put us onto their newest platform and help us redesign however we see fit within the parameters of what their new platform allows. So I do want to make sure that that's known up front, that there is a limitation to this. We're certainly open to any ideas and any suggestions that might benefit the website. At the same time, we may not be able to put all of them in motion. We have to determine what is feasible and what is not. With regards to functionality, that's where we tend to run into limitations in the platform. We may be able to compensate or change things to come close to what's being suggested. As far as content goes, we are pretty much wide open and can do what we want. So that's an area of focus for us to make sure that we're capturing what the public needs and what the public wants out of the city's website. With that, I also wanted to talk about the time frame just a little bit further. The refresh actually starts in February of 2019, but Jason and I are going around to as many of the committees and commissions as possible to be able to gather as much information as we can. So I'm hopeful that the bulk of this is going to be more of Jason and I listening and not so much of us talking. So I just want to get through some of these things right up front. The refresh starts on February of 2019. We anticipate somewhere in the vicinity of a few months, up to 6 months to process this. We hope to be able to expedite that even further, faster, by gathering all of this information up front ahead of time before that project kickoff starts. So with that, on our screen, I've brought up the City of DeKalb's website, specifically the Planning and Zoning Commission's website, and just for some point of reference as to what we have currently. And I've also brought four samples of the new platform that I can also show you, so you can see what's different, and we can go over some of the design attributes that kind of pop out as different than what we have currently. So the first one we show is Portland, Maine, and there's a couple feature pieces that are quite different than what we have. The city's website currently has 5 buttons about halfway down the page. In this instance, those 5 buttons are over here on the left side, and they actually trail you as you scroll through the site. Now notice that these buttons are icons, and you have to hover over them in order to actually see what they are. So if you're not familiar enough with the icons, it's not intuitive right off the bat, but that is something that we can look at and figure out what makes sense. You also see that the news and alerts is down further on their site, and it consists of smaller banners that can be scrolled through. In our case, this portion of the site is right up top as an overhead banner. So they've changed it to the banner being more of a design piece, and the functionality is further down the page. The search bar is in the upper right corner, and it's fairly visible, and I bring that up because in other examples it's a little bit different. The next one is Riley County, Kansas. As opposed to having the 5 buttons that follow you that way, they still have that over here. They're a little differently formatted into tabs. We still have that iconography there unless we hover over it to find out what exactly it is. But if you'll notice down here, they have the 5 buttons that we do in sort of a modified overlay where you can sort of see through it.
Are they the same 5 buttons as on the left?
No, Riley County's, the left one is different. If I
Yeah, this is
the
latest news, upcoming events, contact us, back to the top, so you have a way to refocus back up to the very top of the page. And then down here they have bus schedule, commission meetings, GIS, and other information. So again, they've also broken out into these types of pieces as sort of a latest news or a way to feed through different navigation features. And then they have news and announcements down here. Same idea, they're not using that top banner page as your news and up-to-date information. They have a separate section of that, and the very top of that is more visual as a landing page. Search bar is fairly noticeable up in that upper right corner. This is Oak Hill, Tennessee. Same idea, except they have over here the icons plus the words, so you can see, not only recognize the iconography, but also have it written as to what those buttons represent. The search bar is much more prominent in this one than the previous examples. And then they have another latest news down here, as opposed to having it through there. So it seems like the pattern is shifting from that latest news in that scroll feature. However, I'm working with Civic Plus to see if the popular consensus is to keep that news scroll. Then we're going to work with them to see if we can keep that as part of the page. And one thing to notice about Oak Hill is that it is extremely brief. There is these navigation features, and then down here, latest news, and that's it. So there is a lot less quick linking to subsequent pages than in other sites. And the last example that we're going to show is the city of Elgin. And I captured this one specifically because there's been a few organizations that I've talked to going through this process that have done similar things to what we're doing in a slightly different manner. They went with public focus groups and really dove in with that with a specific group and walked through different features. And what they found in their research was everyone wants this search bar just right there, right in the middle, and basically some were saying that's all people wanted. So I don't know if I would go to that extreme, but I wanted to kind of gauge reactions to this because it is a significantly different design setup than a lot of the other examples that we've been looking at. They also have the 5 navigation bars down here, or icons that follow you as you scroll through this. Now, there is one other design feature that is becoming more popular, and I'm noticing more and more, and that is this sort of group of 3 as in terms of sort of generic navigation, for lack of a better phrase. This one, in this case, it's live, work, and play. I've seen others that it's residents, businesses, and visitors, but it seems to be very popular to have that breakdown and then have the corresponding subsequent pages designed specifically for those groups. So in this case, this was the live, I believe. Yep. So with that, the questions that we have and that we're hoping will spark some good communication or a conversation is, what do you like? What do you not like? Especially with regards to our existing site. We can also dive into some of the other features of the example sites that we've provided. And additionally, this can be absolutely as free form as you would like it, and we're really interested in hearing your thoughts and feelings on how we can make our site better.
So you guys can jump in whenever you want, but I'm going to ask right off the bat. So what feedback have you gotten so far?
Quite a bit and quite varying.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have received a lot of feedback regarding simplicity, making things easier to find. The group of 3 seems to be a popular trend as well, of having that residents, businesses, visitors breakdown.
Do you
yes.
worry that might? So when I first saw that, at first I was like, "Are you on their chamber page?" Like, are you concerned that might make people confused that they're on a chamber page versus a city page? That was just my first thought when I saw it. I'm like, what? They must be on that chamber page. And then I realized Chamber of Commerce page, yeah.
Okay, and that was the
or a visitor bureau or something. You know what I mean?
That was this page here, the,
When you went back to the live, work, play?
mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that. I like
Okay.
that. But at first when I saw it, I was like, that looks like a Chamber of Commerce page.
Okay. Does that, is there aspects of it that is it a confusing aspect that you're,
No, I just
Pushing, or is
was,
it-
I was just wondering if there would be any concern that people might steer off that page then because they think maybe they've landed on a visitor, the Visitor and Convention Bureau page or the Chamber's page or something,
yeah, okay.
Would it make sense
like it,
for
but-
us to, sorry, Mark, as Director Thorson pointed out, would it make sense to go along the lines of maybe residents, commercial, visitors? We could do something like that, or is that still chamber-y, if you may? I'm asking you.
I like this word. I like the verbiage on it. I like how it looks.
Okay.
I was more
No,
On your
that's a
guys'
valid
aspect,
point.
yeah.
If that's something I can tell you personally, no, I didn't think of that, but I can honestly say I'm not on that many chamber sites. I'm more on municipal government sites.
right.
So
Right.
I think that what might change that aspect is if you had, like, for instance, the city seal on it somewhere, or something that was just more formal
At the top or something.
associated with it. I mean, I like the simplicity. I like the 3-button idea, and I like the ease of navigation. Obviously, nobody wants to go through 1,000 submenus to find what they're doing, but I mean, if you guys looked at, like, the Google Analytics of how people are using the site now, you'd probably get a very good idea of what the priorities are. And that having been said, put those up in the forefront and put the things that are the least attractive somewhere in a submenu. But I would agree that you could confuse that. But again, if there was something more official, like the city seal or something associated with it at the same time, that I think looks particularly playful just because of the border that they have around it and the font that they've used.
one thing, or no, go ahead.
What I was going to say was in regards to the analytics of the website. We're definitely watching the analytics and keeping an eye on what's trending and what isn't. I think what we're looking for also, though, is the gap that analytics can't give us, and that's what people aren't finding. What people are, it's things that if they're not actively searching for it and just walking away, analytics isn't really going to tell us what they were trying to get to necessarily in a lot of cases. So absolutely, we are definitely keeping that going as some empirical evidence for us, or sort of empirical evidence, but at the same time, really reaching out to the community and talking with people and understanding. We also have a survey available on the website that we're collecting as well, just so that we can start targeting some of the specific questions that'll help us guide how we're managing this as well.
Just out of curiosity, like, what are the top 3 or 4 things that are being hit?
Yep. Hang on one second. As far as the analytics go?
Yeah.
Okay. Outside of the homepage, which is naturally going to be one of the top hitters, it's online payments, employment, police department, utility billing, government, transit, agenda center, refuse and recycling. Those are some of the top page views that we're getting in terms of the. And this was just a snapshot in time, and it was back in October, so obviously it might have shifted just a little bit since.
So obviously the majority of the hits are coming from residents. I mean, like 90% of them, I'm guessing.
That would be our best guess looking at this.
Okay.
But we don't know if there's businesses or developers coming in that are missing things and they don't know where to go or something along those lines. So we definitely want to keep our ears open for that as well.
Yeah.
I'm somewhat, I don't know if surprised, I'm digesting this as we go, and I hear what you just said and trying to understand it. It sounds a lot like internal, meaning local citizens looking at the website from those hits. And the reason I bring that up or think about it is because nowadays, I guess the last time I moved from one city to another was more than 10 years ago, so I'm kind of outdated in that sense. But I suspect that one of the things that people look into when they're thinking about moving into a different city is they go to the website of that city. And the question I have is, what do we know about that? And what do we know about that, and how can we improve in that department? I mean, how can the website be a conduit to what the city of DeKalb is, or at least what it wants to portray it is?
That's an excellent question.
And that is an open
Yeah.
question, I realize. There's not much of an answer to it, but.
No, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you on that, but if anyone can steer us in the right direction to grab some of that insight, we're definitely open to suggestions.
I guess that takes me then to the next thing that I was going to say, which is, does the city of DeKalb have any marketing, internal, external? Do we go outside to create an image, a branding idea, and stuff like that? Is that something that we're currently doing? I don't know if anybody can answer that.
Are you talking for economic development purposes, or just people moving to the community like you suggest?
All of the above.
No, we don't have anybody on staff doing that. We do have people that work on press releases and trying to get current information out, and
Has the city ever considered the possibility of hiring an outside company to do that for the city of DeKalb?
I don't know.
Or this
Great question.
this might be it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another form of marketing, to tag off of what Director Charlton said, we use social media. We use multiple different mediums for that: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we do actively try to post a lot more press releases than previously on the city website and get all that information out. So we are trying to use different methods. Each of those social media sites we actually kind of shape to the demographics of those who follow us on that page. Instagram is an example where it's a younger population looking, so we post a lot more activities and community events going on that meet that demographic target, whereas Facebook, it's a little bit older and people are looking for different information, agenda or meetings such as these. Planning and zoning and city council meetings are actually Facebook posts made letting everybody know those meetings and that they're broadcast through GATV. So we do a little bit of tooling in that sense with marketing and trying to pinpoint and give that information to citizens.
Thank you.
Do we use cookies on the site?
No, not that, I mean, I have to double check with Civic Plus, but we don't actively use cookies to my knowledge.
Well, and the reason I asked, I mean, if you were talking about using it for marketing purposes, I mean, obviously that would be some good tracking information. And if there was any link to the MLS site, for instance, if people were looking for the demographics of the area or they were considering moving here, I mean, that's a great way to keep them in mind after the fact, or even pixel placement on other sites just to find out where they're going. I mean, I guess the larger question becomes, are we using it as a promotional tool since we don't have any promotion? And if we're not, maybe we should look at not necessarily, I mean, making the things that are important to the residents readily available, but, going back to the live, work, play thing, make it just more attractive overall, and less of a municipal tool and more of a marketing tool.
And this type, the live, work, play, would really play.
Absolutely.
Not play on words, but play on that, yeah.
When you had sent the links, one of the things I noticed in looking at all the other sites too is that there's really some great imagery of all those areas that really highlight it, and that's one of the things that I think we desperately need. I mean, we want to make it look like an attractive community. I mean, whether those be, new, old photos, whatever the case may be. I mean, I know that there's a massive archive of 2 photographers over in Swen Parsons that predate, I mean, literally the beginning of this town going back. Of downtown shots, but I mean, there's a lot of good photographers in town. I've taken some pretty amazing shots, at dusk and dawn around here, and that would be phenomenal to use. I mean, even a couple of drone shots like the one you're seeing of Elgin right now, downtown DeKalb, would be phenomenal. But I mean, I think you want to give them a flavor of what the city is like.
Yeah.
And Mr. Maxwell, we would like to talk to you about working out something to have those pictures and provide appropriate credit as well
absolutely.
Because that's
my
one
wife and my
aspect of
son are
this.
both photographers, and I know a ton of people that take really nice shots around here, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to volunteer them.
Absolutely. And that is something that we're working with community development on as well, as engaging the art community and trying to figure out what ways we can not only make the site look nicer, more aesthetically pleasing, but also provide a boost for community members that are doing really good work here.
Sure.
So.
Just going back to my original thought, I mean, is there a link to the MLS on here at all? The multiple listing site for housing?
I think there's a link to is it the Proudly DeKalb website, which then has all of that linkage to the MLS and all of the other organizations within the community. So we have a lot of links that get you to those things.
Okay,
but
but they'd
it's
have
not,
to dig kind of deep.
It doesn't
to get
bring you here.
If
Yeah.
you know where to find them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
the
maybe
one
that's-
thing that has been,
I mean, maybe somewhere, at least in the first or maybe in the second or third tier, but I mean, somewhere fairly prominent there should be a question of considering moving here, and then that
Just
brings
have
you
that
immediately to a,
And these are also some of the things that we're interested in as well. In previous meetings, we were getting ideas for linking to external sites that makes sense for that area that weren't there before. And so we're definitely making sure we're trying to engage feedback on that as well. So the MLS is an excellent example of something we should be looking at adding to the site, and we're keeping a list of that as well.
sure.
Getting back to the marketing idea, I've lived here all my life, but if I were moving to a new town, what would be the things I'd be most interested in finding out? And we have some things here that I think would be helpful. The hospital, we have a new hospital, we have a new library, we have the university, we have schools. Those are things I think I would be looking for information on if I was moving to a community, and I think we have some very good facilities in all of those areas.
So like a real quick
Pardon?
fact sheet, like
Yeah,
a real
something
quick
like
fact
that.
sheet
Yeah,
of,
just a very abridged get-to-know-me type
Of
bullet
course,
point,
a picture of the library, a
factoid.
picture of the hospital, a picture of some of these places would be helpful.
I'm dating myself, but the USA Today corner of the paper factoid type brag statements.
yeah.
yeah. I'm on the page right now. I'm on our website now.
Mhm.
And there's this Explore DeKalb. And I have sat here trying to see what all is on that. And as I scroll down, I lose that page. So definitely the ability to move around easier on the website. I know you guys have been doing a really great job of social media and making sure that the city's presence is on social media. I go out there and read a lot of comments and read a lot of things that are going on. And I think when you guys put up the information about the website, that was one of the comments, if I remember correctly, seeing that our website is so difficult to maneuver around. Like, I can't just go out here and find the different commissions very easily. And I can't remember which site it was, but I did notice there was a button for commissions. I think that's really important. And maybe combining it with, your meetings and agendas button or something, make it all one area because they all kind of flow together. Or I'm going through website conversion right now at work too, so that it's in my head a little. There's some things on our page that I do like. I like having the calendar available, and I like having the latest news at the top. So have you gotten any feedback about that not potentially or not possibly being up on the top? I mean, I can see the pros and cons of it.
As far as location or the design?
The location. So most of
Okay.
the sites that you've shown us now, all so far, the news and even like important information or whatever is down lower. So that like right there where you've got that top of the web page where we've got our news right now, that's their kind of segue into their city, sort of, which is great, but then you got to scroll down to see any news happening. And maybe it's just because I'm used to seeing that there and it would take a little time to get used to that. But have you gotten any feedback about
The
having that moved
consensus
down?
from the meetings that we've had overall has been to keep and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, to keep the latest news up at the top.
So it's easy to see.
And
yeah.
it seems the majority of people seem to like, or the public that has come to these public meetings that we've had and with the committees and commissions have seemed to indicate that they prefer this sort of scroll with the news.
Yeah, I do too.
To be honest, also, it's a benefit by having something that's moving and dynamic, whereas some websites are that static imagery. We can update this, and we do regularly update it as the department and the city, and you can see new content, which is really beneficial, we feel, at least.
Going back to the mechanics of it for a second, has the website been optimized for search engines?
We've been looking through that. There's a few aspects of this that we're in the process of doing, as well as some of the content cleanup. And one of the things we've done, just some generic steps that we've taken, the entire site now is HTTPS, which Google has indicated that they rank HTTPS higher than non-secured sites. So that's one area that we that we go through. We also keep an eye on, it's kind of outdated now, but we do keep an eye on meta tags that are in the site to try and help steer things. But I have not gone through a full-fledged like an SEO type process with it.
Well, and that was my next question is, when's the last time that the meta tags were analyzed? I mean, obviously we want anything associated with the Midwest, fun living, you know, corn, DeKalb, college, I mean, anything that could push us up in the rankings.
It's a little difficult with that because Google has also started, and I say Google just because it seems when they make a rule, it sort of drives the internet.
In the room.
So they've also have started to decrease the emphasis on that because of sites maliciously, or not really maliciously,
they pack them,
packing out the meta tags to get more search results. One of the things that I, just in speaking with people who know far more about SEO than I do, have told me is one of the benefits to us changing the imagery as frequently as we do is that does keep things a little bit higher. Google tends to trend toward more dynamic pages as opposed to something that just doesn't change.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the more you change the content, which was my next question, because, like, for instance, in the news content, obviously you want it to be a destination and a source of information. So how frequently do we add news to it? I mean, you know, obviously I think most of us go to the Chronicle on a daily basis to see what new articles have been added. How frequently are we updating the information on this? Because when it becomes stale, people become stagnant.
I would like to say we change it at least a couple times a week, but I will tell you that there are times when it lags a little bit. I don't know if we go more than a couple of weeks without at least modifying one piece of the banner scroll to provide some information. We've also started when it's sometimes you run into an issue where there isn't a lot of content right then and there. So we've taken an additional step to just throw a picture out there that we were able to pull from our archives and put that available. It doesn't happen as frequently, but it has happened a couple times in the past.
Well, and going back to the amateur photographers that are out there, then I'm sure that there are a lot of them even in the high school and college as well. I mean, that maybe that's something you just have an open contribution to that you can sort through, and people get published with, you know, a little bit of recognition for it. But you know, let them throw photos at you left and right and see, you know, how many ducks in a lagoon you'll get.
Absolutely.
utilize some of the KISH students, or like you said, the high school students that.
Yeah. One thing I will say to that, to your submission comment, we have discussed doing a social media campaign in the sense of post your picture about DeKalb or something along those lines. It is something we've discussed. It's just we haven't gotten to that point. Once we figure out more on the website with what we're going to do with it, that's when we'll probably come out with an event or something like that.
Well, and going back to the point, and I understand, I mean, sometimes there's simply, I mean, we're not a news agency, so sometimes there just isn't anything new to report on. But that may actually, going back to the staticness of the site, go back and be able to allow you to change backgrounds and photos on a periodic basis just to add a little bit more excitement so that at least when people come back, they're not seeing the same thing every time. So, I mean, that might be a free pool resource for you.
Absolutely.
And I'm on a part of a volunteer organization that it has been known that changing their website, changing the photos on the website tends to draw people more to the website and then to donate or to do whatever needs to be done, because it is different, and they want to see what's being updated, and they want to see what's going on, and it's attracting their attention and getting them to be there and be a part of that site. So yeah, I think that's important.
Absolutely.
And I would also say, when you're thinking about putting pictures on, don't, maybe not just current pictures, but work in some of those old pictures if you can find them, because to me, I love going to the Joiner History Room's Facebook page just to see what they've posted, because they've got some really cool pictures of old DeKalb and the different areas as they have grown up, and it's just really neat to go, oh, well, I know where that is, but wow, that looks really different,
You need to go to this one, Parson.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There's an archive of hundreds of thousands of photos dating back to the beginning of this city, where there's horse-drawn sleighs going down Lincoln Highway from the Dr. Smith, shot from the Dr. Smith building. There's some amazing stuff out there.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Lisa Miner would be the contact that could get you into there.
So, and I know as I'm going through this, I'm remembering some of the other things that are top of mind that I've heard frequently. The other one is that our site is too wordy.
Yeah.
Lots of words.
Yeah.
We're looking at that from a staff perspective, and we're trying to come up with a sort of a checklist, as it were, to help, because we are working at a decentralized level. Especially when you're lean staffed, it's difficult to try and centralize a project like this. So we're trying to, we have been decentralized for a while, which means the departments will maintain their own content, but we want to be able to provide them with some guidelines on how to do this.
Some web standards.
Because while the content management system that's built into Civic Plus provides for, you're not going to have numerous different fonts and things like that. It's going to be, these are your 3 fonts to choose from depending on if it's a header or text, so things like that. But what it doesn't prevent is how your tables are set up, because the site as it is right now is dynamically sizing. So it will, as if you bring it up on a mobile phone, it will look different than it does now, but you're still on the same site. Many years ago, they stopped doing you get redirected to a mobile site if you're on a phone versus your regular site. Now it just dynamically sizes to whatever screen size you're using. And then what will happen is some of the pictures change to words, and the menu, the buttons will change into menu options, those sorts of things. But what happens is if you don't arrange the site correctly in terms of where you're putting tables, how many tables you have, how much information is there, it becomes completely unusable when it comes down to a mobile device. So we want to make sure that we're cognizant of that as well. So we're really trying to work towards retraining our staff on helping with that. We're also going to talk to them about being careful not to turn it into a novel and make it a little bit more quick hitter website friendly, more graphics, more, just make it more aesthetically pleasing. And then we're really trying to keep an effort toward that, and also reducing the amount of pages that we have as well, as best as we can. I don't know how successful we'll be with that, because there's only a certain level we can go to, but having a leaner staff, we want to make sure that we're not maintaining quite as much. So.
Question for you guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you find yourselves using the website in your role as a planning and zoning commissioner at all? I mean,
Yes, I use it. Not often, but use it.
Yeah, I've used it to go out and pull up the UDO, but then I get frustrated, yeah. But then I get frustrated because I don't have it bookmarked. That's my own fault.
Okay.
And then I can't find it. Like, it takes me forever to find it. And that's always been a frustrating piece.
So there is, I'm sorry, I don't know if there was something else that you wanted to say about that.
Keep going.
Oh, keep going. Well, I want to actually, if anything, I wanted to say an overarching comment about this discussion. First and foremost, Max, you have impressed me with all the wealth of suggestions. His contact information, I think, is public, so reach out.
I am nothing if
Yes,
not a
ma'am.
wealth of worthless knowledge.
Great knowledge.
I think the overarching comment that I wanted to make is I think there are two big audiences here that we have been going back and forth. There is the internal audience, i.e. us, the citizens of DeKalb. Believe me, if I want to get excited about the city of DeKalb, I do not go to the website of the city of DeKalb. I go to the website of the city of DeKalb for practical reasons, because I want a document, I want to find the UDO, I want to find Dan's phone numbers, information like that. And in that sense, the key question, the key statement is, does it work? And we have heard that in some instances it doesn't work. One way in which you can kill me, and I would never go back, is make it not work for me once or twice. I will never go back. So confidence is destroyed if I cannot find what I need. So it has to work. That's the overarching question, statement when it comes to that audience, the audience which is the internal audience. Then there's the audience of the outside, somebody that is thinking about moving to the city of DeKalb. The city of DeKalb strikes me as the place where you would go to the website. If you're from the outside of DeKalb, you would go to the website because you already have a job in offering DeKalb, for example. You don't necessarily think of the city of DeKalb, from God knows where in the state of New York. You would think about the city of DeKalb is where I'm going to go. You probably come to the city of DeKalb because you have a job offer or something is already pulling you in this direction. And that website is all about reeling you in. How do you bring that person in further, I think, is the question that we need to answer with the website. How can we connect this person to something else? It might be something hidden, but it has to be enticing. That person may have a job in the university doing science, but guess what? That person likes to do community theater on the side. Guess what? We have a community theater in DeKalb. And who knows how we can make those connections. And this is all very challenging, but all I wanted to do was to make a statement about the two big audiences that we have. They seem to me to be very, very different. And somehow the websites have to work for this kind of stuff. So
I have a question for you. So as you are looking through the different websites that you presented to us tonight, did you also go on your phone, your mobile device, and pull up those pages? And when you did that, did you have one that struck out to you?
So the one that I think just naturally sticks out to me just because of the stark difference from all the others was the city of Elgin. And on the phone versus, and I can sort of mimic that.
I was on my phone looking at them as you were kind of pulling them up,
Yep.
so I was curious. Yeah. that's what
And
drew
that
my
was
curiosity.
just because of the way that they took that versus versus all the others. So that one stuck out to me just in sheer starkness. As far as usability goes, I think the Portland, Maine looked very appealing in terms of being used, and that's just my personal opinion.
The one thing I didn't like about the Portland, Maine one, I will say, is that you had to hover over those buttons to know what they were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, probably after using it a couple of times, you'd get it and you might remember it. But if I'm an elderly person looking for something, I might not necessarily remember what those buttons are. Then I've got to scroll over to them, That's the one piece I
yeah.
didn't like about that, but yeah, it was a nice site. Okay. I'm just
Absolutely,
curious.
and iconography is a difficult thing because certain ones we just know are what they are just because of how ubiquitous they are on the internet, but there are others that, I mean, you don't really come across except if you go to a municipal page. And then if you choose an icon to make that work, it's not going to be something that's natural or intuitive to recognize right off the bat. So we've kind of gone back and forth on that, but the consensus seems to be you need words with the icons, not just the icons themselves.
Going back to the usability and the depth, what's the average amount of time people are spending on the site now?
I don't know if I grabbed that stat right off the bat. No, I just grabbed page views. I apologize.
Okay.
That's something we can find out.
Do you have unique visitors versus return visitors?
That one I didn't grab either.
Okay.
We do capture those, though, and that's going to be part of our research and part of our presentation on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious as to the depth and the amount of time that they're spending, and I mean, obviously you know where they're going, but,
Yeah.
you know, I guess I didn't realize that we're not utilizing it so much as a marketing piece as we probably should, but, yeah, I think there's a missed opportunity there, definitely, and especially if we're not promoting the city in any other way. I mean, everybody finds everything online, so I think blasting it out there and optimizing the search engines and making sure that we get some character content of the city in there is probably vitally important. I mean, I think the people that are in the city are probably finding what they need to, and I agree. I mean, the nav could be a little bit easier, but brightening it up and making it show a little bit more of the character of the city probably is pretty vital.
Absolutely, and that goes to the survey that we're also doing, because again, the amount of time you spend on a page is good to know. It's good analytics, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a person's lost or they can't find what they're trying to get to.
True.
So as, like, one of the questions in that survey is specifically, on your last visit, were you able to find what you were looking for? Now, there are some questions about that, because they said, well, yeah, that time I was, but there's been others that aren't. But we have to figure out how to exactly word those survey questions to capture that moment in time, to understand what's going on. And so while for one person it might have been hit or miss, for others it might have been spot on or something along those lines. So we're really trying to
Well, and
gather
the people that
as
take the
much as we
surveys
can.
are kind of a unique character set in and of themselves, so. Do we have any, like 24-hour cameras going in off the student center or anything that are live feeds from DeKalb?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of them in all kinds of cities, so, I mean, it might be.
NIU does have them.
Yeah, the one that looks into the MLK Commons.
Yeah,
They
I
used
mean,
to.
that attached to a weather crawler would be something that people would look at. I would.
Yeah, those are fun to, like, if you're away and you,
Oh, yeah.
you know, you miss the
Yeah, and just
10-inch
to-
snowfall and you
when
want to
you're
see
in
what it
Florida,
looks
you
like.
look
Yeah,
back and go,
I know.
ha!
Look at that.
Look what I'm missing.
Oh,
Exactly.
I don't want to go home.
Let me show you where I'm not.
My computer shut down, so I had to go to my phone, so I can't multitask as easily. So my question is, do we excuse me, do we have a link to the chamber website or the Visitor and Convention Bureau site on our website?
Believe so.
Okay, that's just one piece that I think we need to really make sure stays on there.
They're on
Also-
Explore DeKalb.
Okay.
They're probably in a couple of places. I think they're, if you go into the community development site, under partners, you'll get there as well.
And the reason why I ask is because when I travel, if I'm going to go visit a city I've never been to, I actually do go online and try to find some information out about the city, because I want to know, local eateries, because I don't like to do the, big box food places. I want to do local stuff. And as people are considering coming here, or even to move here, I think that's an important aspect. And I do end up getting on municipality websites once in a while, because I think it just is what I found, and that's what I came to. And having that link, I think, then to their chamber sites or their visitor sites has been really beneficial to get that information. And I think that's where having on Elgin's site, where it had that live, work, play, I think that I like that concept, because you can pull some of that stuff in without, we're not a chamber, we're not the chamber, but we have plenty of things that we can add into those areas that I think would be very attractive for visitors coming to DeKalb or potentially thinking about moving here, where the live section, you can put the MLS up, and helping with that ease to find things, I think that's my most important message, is make it a little bit more user-friendly.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, when I travel, I do the same thing. A lot of times I'll go to the municipality site, or I'll go to the Travelocity, or the, not Travelocity, what's the, Yelp, and what's the other one I'm missing?
Travel advisor.
Yes, TripAdvisor.
TripAdvisor.
Yeah. And so, I mean,
It's
definitely
getting
being
late.
linked to those, but looking at it from a marketing standpoint, I mean, obviously, as you were saying, I mean, we want to talk about the parades, we want to talk about the festivals, we want to talk about the arts programs, and again, it is important for everybody to get to what they need to around here, but again, I think if you're looking at first-time unique visitors, then you're probably going to be able to increase that traffic by pumping up those types of promotions.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for including us in this discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much for,
Absolutely. I'm thrilled with all the information that we've been able to collect in this. So thank you very much for this.
thanks for taking the time to explain it.
Sure.
Thanks, guys, yeah. And thanks, Commission, great input.
Sure. Yeah, thank you all. So our next item for discussion is miscellaneous text amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance, and I'll open it right up to Dan.
Yeah, this is a discussion, no public hearing. Occasionally, as you know from the past, we'll bring some miscellaneous text amendments, ideas to the commission for discussion, and eventually have a hearing on, and then forward to the council. These usually result in, you know, I guess, using the ordinance throughout the year, and projects come in, and we take a look at the regulations, and then seems like every project, there's something in the UDO maybe that, you know, we need to tweak or look at, but these actually come from, you know, things that come into the door, so we're trying to respond to those, and also look ahead at things we're seeing, and there's a little discussion here on signs, too, related to kind of overhaul on that related to a Supreme Court case, so there's no graphics I have. You had the memo in your packet, so I'll just kind of run through that. What we're looking at, so just looking for some feedback, questions, is kind of an educational point too, and to start some discussions, and then the plan is to kind of get the feedback and then set a hearing on these sometime in January, and with the sign discussion, we're probably going to want to do that entirely, overhaul that, and that maybe take a little bit longer, so that would probably be a separate kind of amendment down the road. But let me just run through these initially first. In our fence regulations in the UDO, we need to probably, suggesting we take a look at adding some language on materials of fences, ones that are either acceptable or perhaps is expanding the ones that are prohibited. We do currently not allow electrical fencing. There's restrictions on barbed wire fencing, only in industrial districts in the rear and side yards. But we've had a few, I think, not too many, of some of these other materials, chicken wire or snow fencing as part of fencing or in addition to other fencing. So probably need to expand we don't want to see prohibited materials for fencing. And fencing is broken down basically between privacy fencing, which is solid, and open fencing, which is 50% open. And based on what type of fence it is, there's a maximum height for fences and where it can be located in the front yard or side or rear yard. So we're just suggesting some expansion of the prohibited fence materials. Also in Article 7, we have regulations regarding when a traffic study kicks in. And what we just want to change there, we have pretty good standards on what, in terms of the amount of traffic that's generated and other criteria. We just want to switch what, currently the language has the city council determining upon recommendation from the public works director when a traffic analysis should be done. We just want to change that to kind of more current practice where we have the city engineer kind of overseeing that and determining when we should do a traffic analysis. So in Article 12 is the parking restrictions. We want to have some, looked at some amendments, and here we do have some specific language already drafted up regarding the materials for parking lots and driveways. That'd be for residential and commercial. Currently, the UDO only allows Portland cement concrete or asphalt for acceptable materials for parking lots and driveways. So staff has looked at some alternate materials in the past, kind of based on what residents are have asked for occasionally. Those relate to concrete pavers or paver blocks. So currently the ordinance doesn't allow those, it doesn't address those. We've had residents inquire about those. Some have installed them or put them on the side of their driveway or maybe a storage area. So what we're proposing in the language has been drafted up. We worked with our city engineer to come up with some specifics, is allowing those to be done if you want to do them for your driveway, with some minimum requirements. And it's kind of broken down between the single family and two family, and then multifamily and commercial. For like single family, at your home, we'd have minimum standards for the depth of the concrete pavers, and then the base, a minimum depth for that. And then the commercial, of course, that would be deeper, more materials that are more, allow a heavier weight on them. And so we want to have a minimum width, depth of this materials and the base, so that over long term that the maintenance, they don't break down and crumble. We just want people putting bricks, and this is for the driveway and storage areas, not for patios or a little walkway around the side of your house or something. So also we have the minimum standards is for color or tone of the pavers, with some discretion provided by the department. And of course, for the commercial and multifamily, higher standards for that. But in those cases, we haven't had, I don't think, too many of those requests, but it's kind of a new trend where you can have a parking lot. Of course, with the permeable pavers, the water goes through those, so one could have that type of parking lot and have a reduction in your stormwater detention on site. And the city engineers put together language, if somebody chooses to do that in a parking lot, is the requirements in terms of what you have to provide and minimum standards to determine how much of your stormwater detention could be reduced if you have these type of paver blocks, because it's kind of a new trend, eco-friendly, where the water goes through instead of running right off detention, they can seep through the bricks, and you can maybe save a little storage under stormwater detention on that. So there's provisions in there. If somebody wants to do that, that's open. And so we have language on that, so that's one of the recommendations that we'd like to go forward on. Also, somewhat related to parking lots, or in that same article, is the landscaping requirements for parking lots. We currently have standards for the perimeter of the parking lot in terms of the front, side, and rear yard, of the amount of landscaping you have to have, trees and shrubs. It also does require on the yards adjoining a street berming requirements in addition to the shrubs and trees. So in the implementation of that over the last few years, it's easier on larger sites and smaller sites. It's been somewhat more difficult to also have a berm, because you need a certain width to get the 3-foot high berm. You need a certain width there to get the slope right. And I think when the mobile gas station on First Street, I think they had a shorter berm, or they just didn't have the width to do that. So I think some language that would allow some flexibility on smaller sites to either have a berm or shrubs instead of both. It just doesn't make sense on some infill sites or smaller sites to have both. But certainly on larger properties, that would certainly make sense, and we continue with the language on that. Article 13 is the sign regulations. So, and what I have in here is some kind of a summary of a Supreme Court case in 2015 out in Arizona. Town of Gilbert had regulations, like many other communities, that based the sign regulations on the content of the signs. And in their ordinance, they had different regulations for based on the message, on signs for churches or political signs, not-for-profit, all had different regulations on how high, square footage, how long they could be up, based on what the content, the message. A church out there did file suit that worked its way up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did rule that it was content-based and was unconstitutional. So Gilbert did, and many other communities have too, some change the regulations to have more content-neutral regulations for their signs, and that's something we need to work towards in our regulations. And the memo kind of goes through some of the background on that case. The regulations are from that Supreme Court case. You still can have regulations on signs to ensure public safety, like where they can be placed. They don't block vision on traffic, when you're coming out from an intersection. Maximum height and sizes, but you can't base it on content. You could, based on the zoning district it's in. You can also restrict, off-site signs, the lighting for the sign, and other things like that, but just not the content. So DeKalb's ordinance, we do have several areas in there that are content-based. We do have different restrictions for particularly, in the commercial, it's all pretty much straight, but when we get to like particular uses mentioned, like churches and schools, public buildings have different regulations than the commercial districts, commercial uses. We also have different regulations for political signs compared to directional signs or temporary signs. We have 3 different categories: government agency, commercial, industrial, and non-for-profit. So that's got to be combined just where it's not based on the content. We have discussed this in the past. In terms of the enforcement of the signs, we've, kind of more complaint-driven at this time. So we're a little cautious more of the enforcement, since we have some regulations that could be potentially challenged. So we want to make sure our regulations get more in order to meet that Supreme Court decision. There are some, I did suggest about a half a dozen other changes in the sign regulations. Some are based on content neutral, but I think what we're recommending, and the schedule kind of looking forward is, have a discussion on this. I'd like to go forward with a public hearing regarding the non-sign issues that we were discussing, going forward with that probably in January. It's planned in January that the City Council Committee of the Whole will be looking at, have a discussion regarding the signs regulations, and from that discussion and from tonight, we'd like to, put together a draft of the sign regulation changes to meet some of these other things that need to be addressed, plus the content neutral issues, and then go through the process with that with the commission and the council, and as we march into 2019 through the first part of the year. So I'll just go through briefly some of the other recommended changes. The current regulations don't cover wall signs. Regulations for non-residential uses located in residential zone properties, for example, churches and schools. Ran in that with Little John School, where we did have to come up with get their approval through a special use permit. So we like to just have that wall sign regulations basically the same as the commercial sign regulations, which is based on the frontage of the building in terms of your maximum size. As I mentioned kind of before, the UDO has regulations for churches, schools, and public buildings in terms of maximum square footage and height, but it is different than a commercial sign. So we have a content issue there with what the sign says, but also allowing those types of uses to also have a second freestanding sign if they're on a corner lot, if they have double frontage on a street. And that's currently not allowed for those types of uses. In the commercial, we do allow that. If you have double frontage, you can have a sign on each frontage, as long as I think there's a 200-foot distance you have to have on that second frontage. If you have that, then you can have a second sign. So I think just making that allowed for these other uses also. Digital display signs. We've had experience with these a little bit. They're prohibited in the UDO. The UDO currently doesn't allow waivers to the sign regulations unless you get a special use permit or if it's part of a planned development. So we've had a few special use permits applied for a couple signs recently for digital display signs. Little John School was one, and Hillcrest Covenant Church on First Street recently, where they had those digital display signs which were approved. And we also had some in the past with DeKalb High School, Bemis Toyota, First Midwest Bank, on West Lincoln Highway. They all receive special uses for those. And we have some older ones in town too that kind of predate those requirements. But what we're suggesting is perhaps proving, not requiring a special use permit, but as a right, they can get them as a permit with some restrictions on those, namely that it can only take a maximum percentage of the sign. It can't be the whole sign. And the ones we did approve, they were not the entire sign, they were just part of the portion of the sign, like half of it. Of course, a maximum size, and then the operational limitations that we approved with those recently. If you recall, we had a limit on the time that between the change of messages of 20 seconds, no flashing, no optical illusions with the signs in terms of transitions, and there's other requirements that we had, operational limitations that we approved pretty consistently in the last couple of them. We would have those in the ordinance too. So since we're kind of approving the special uses, and perhaps we could just, with certain restrictions, make them, with a building permit, just get a permit for them if they met these restrictions. Also moving to gas station canopies with the ones we had in the last few years with Casey's and the Mobile. Increasing the allowed max size for canopy signs up to 12 square feet, and also allowing, instead of 2, up to 3. I think I think a few of them had trouble actually getting a 10 square foot sign per their minimum standards they had, so I think that's a slight change we can make, and it's not really going to affect the way sites really look. So, also we have standards for landscaping at the base of pole signs. In the ordinance, that does require skirting around the sign and then some landscaping. I think with some smaller signs that we have, that could, and we need to look at it, maybe put a little more flexibility into this. It might be unreasonable for very smaller signs to have some landscaping. It might grow where it's going to block part of the sign, or it's just not, maybe it's the second sign on the property. So some of the larger signs, and we've required when we've gone through a plan development process, we've had signs that we, does have some landscaping around it, but requiring it in every situation may not make sense all the time. So we'll come up with some language and maybe make it a little more flexible, or in terms of when it would apply. Looking at perhaps allowing off-site directional signage for residential commercial subdivisions. We haven't had too many recent residential subdivisions in the community, but with D.R. Horton looking at or building some homes out there on Malta Road, Devonair Farms, in terms of off-site signage, allowing that in certain standards in terms of the number and size to help direct people to that development that are looking at homes. I think that would help them, and with some regulations, I think we could probably allow that, and with time restrictions of how long they can have them up there, and make sure they're not, they'd probably be more permanent in nature instead of temporary ones where they would, disintegrate over a couple of weeks, or just, kind of maintenance-wise might be an issue there. So we'll look at that, and also another small issue. Window signs, we do have a couple areas in the UDO that need clarifying what max size we allow for window signs. This is windows behind the sign in a business. We have one part of the ordinance that has 40% max coverage, and another part at 25% for neon signs. So I think we just make one standard, perhaps at 50%, to cover that. So again, with the signs, if you have any feedback regarding that, we'll have a committee of the whole have a discussion in January, and then we'll like to do everything at once instead of broken up in terms of the sign regulations, and there'll be some discussion on that with the content neutral, and we have some, I think, pretty good examples of other communities have done this, and we'll be able to create something that works for everybody, and we'll probably have obviously some feedback from the community too as we go through the process regarding the signs. Let's see, this couple other areas, the miscellaneous ones outside the sign, just to cover in our appeals and variance article 18. Just need some language changes to make it clear that for variances, as you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission has a final vote on that. It does not go to the council. It's kind of covered in state statute that the Board of Appeals does that. And of course, we just need a language that kind of states the Planning and Zoning Commission is acting as the Board of Appeals in those, and also change the position that reviews those, those appeals in terms of the interpretation of the UDO, going from the chief building official to the community development director in those. We don't really have too many of those throughout the years. The variances, we need to probably clear up the language or make it very clear, I guess, of what variances can be applied for. For example, for setbacks, maximum building height, anything with a numerical thing attached to it, the UDO is not quite clear on that. The criteria for variances kind of indicates what they're kind of talking about, but it's not clear of what you can apply for variance for. So we need to tighten that up. And we've only had 2 or 3 of those in the past few years. Those haven't been an issue, but clearing that up is language we need to add. So what we're looking for is just some feedback from the commission. If you have any questions or anything, or other parts of the UDO to look at that you've noticed. And then with the ones outside the signs, we'll come back with, we'll put together a public hearing notice for probably the second meeting in January with specific language. And go forward with that, and then those sign discussions will kind of carry on the first part of 2019, kind of separately.
So I just have one quick question regarding the sign piece. So you said that if we made changes to the digital sign when they're applying for their building permit, that would be, they wouldn't have to apply for a special use. What about somebody who's already built and has a sign and wants to change over? Then they have to apply for a special use, or is there any language we need to
That has a
look at
digital sign now?
that does not?
Oh, yeah.
So
they-
like Hillcrest Covenant, for example.
Yeah, if we created language that allowed them to do that with just a permit, not a
Yeah.
special use permit?
Yeah, because it wouldn't, they're not applying for a building permit because they're not building something.
It'd be a sign permit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
same thing.
So it wouldn't be a special use any
Right.
longer, it would be a sign permit, okay.
But
Yeah.
one thing to
I just
consider is a lot of our churches are in residential districts as opposed to a digital sign in a commercial district. So
So we need to
you want to
clarify.
consider, when is it appropriate to make it permitted and allowed by right and pull a building permit? And
Right.
when do you think it would be appropriate to have a public hearing to
That-
give residents an opportunity to hear?
That was my concern.
Yeah.
I think the location is the most important factor to it. I mean, both from a driving perspective and from a residential perspective.
Yeah.
Because, if you happen to be, the Flamingo on Pleasant Street and you're surrounded by houses, I mean, obviously there's issues there with, it shining into people's windows, et cetera. So I'm not so concerned about, in regular commercial areas, but the locations, there have to be some restrictions, and so the approval process, I think, is kind of important.
Yeah, or maybe keep it as special use in residential or
Yeah.
in commercial with restrictions.
And
allowed
and
as a
definitely
permit.
define what commercial means,
Yeah.
We base it on the zoning district it's
Yeah.
in or language like that, but that's a possibility or or certainly, yeah, residential is more sensitive.
roads, do you know? Specific
Um,
streets?
I think there's other language in the UDO that has boundaries
That's an option.
based on roadways, so
Yeah.
that's an option too.
Maybe based on traffic flow, too. I mean,
Or just stricter
you have to
standards if
have,
it's residential,
X amount of
something more
cars going by
strict,
it a
yeah.
day to even allow it. I mean, maybe that's the way that it needs to be approached, because if you're on a residential street, you're not going to have, 1,000 cars a day passing by, and hence it wouldn't do you any good anyway, but that might be one way to look at restricting it.
As a permitted, as
Mhm.
outright permitted.
Yeah, traffic.
And then otherwise go through the special
Correct.
use.
Okay. So we've got a few articles, or this one. Do you want us to go through what you've presented to us?
Only if you've probably got questions or comments or
Okay.
provide further direction. I think we've formalized what general things we want to change, so if there's any things to add
further-
or object to,
I'll
or,
let you start.
I did have one more question. in
either
read-
you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
Just going back to the traffic studies, how many do we do a year? And I'm just curious how much time that would take the city manager.
the traffic studies are, they're not paid for by the city, they're done by the developer. So we don't initiate those. They're done with,
But there
when
is-
when a project comes in, we make a determination based on the traffic impacts, how much traffic will it generate if they do a traffic study or not. They pay for that, and then we have our engineers review that, and they have to submit an escrow, so there's no money cost to the city to do these.
But they're not currently overseen?
No, we have our city engineer review those, but
Okay.
they're reimbursed by the developer to review those studies.
Okay, so then I guess I'm at a loss. What was the change in the,
The current language has the council giving the okay if a traffic study should be done or not.
oh, gotcha.
So we're just changing that to more current practice where the city engineer would determine, based on the project and the traffic impacts, yes, we should do a study, or this scope of analysis should be done on it. So it's
Gotcha.
just changing who kind of gives the okay to go ahead with it, so.
Understood.
My turn?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So I sat down to read this part of what we're going to do, and I really, really like the fact that we're doing this. And the reason for that is because we are bogged down on an ongoing basis with very specific requests that come to us. That's our job. That's part of our job. But this is probably the more consequential in the long term. The recommendations that we make here have more significant long-term effects and consequences. So having said that, I really invite my fellow commissioners and the city staff to think really hard about this and you know, put our best foot forward in making recommendations for changes to the UDO. My first comment at a very general level is more than anything else a challenge. It's a challenge to avoid, I guess, the restrictive language, the too restrictive language. And the reason I say that is a challenge is because at the end of the story, this is a legal document. And the more clear the document is, the better it is at guiding. But at the same time, the more restrictive it is for a newcomer, for example, a developer that is trying to fit in an idea in a space that doesn't necessarily fit in. And if the document can be as inviting as possible to have a dialogue, let's see if this works, the better I think overall the city will be in the future. An excellent example of where I would absolutely agree on being restrictive is I don't want my neighbor put in a electrified, you know, barbed wire, you know, dividing his property from my property. I don't have a problem with that one. That I'm sure, no problem, restrict that, you know, not allowed. But there is a lot more where there is a lot of room for us to be as flexible and show flexibility, project as much flexibility as possible. Having said all that, and that is kind of the bigger picture, I just wanted to bring up a quick couple of comments. I like the ideas around the traffic studies. I would really like it to become a little bit more scientific. I don't mean to look back to criticize anything, but to learn. And one of the things that I should say is that the studies that I have seen in the past, you know, a one-day study, I have a hard time believing that is representative. I will be very interested in seeing a little bit more. I don't know if it is multiple days or focus points during a given day. I really don't know how to do it, but I certainly feel uncomfortable with the traffic studies that I have seen so far. It is a good idea to do them in many instances, but I would like to see them a little bit more meaty, more fleshy. Unfortunately, I realize, I'm fully aware of the fact that it costs money and costs resources, but it would be nice to have, again, a little bit more scientific background behind those things. The other general thing that I was going to say is I think we have learned a lot from some of the petitions that have come in front of us when it comes to signs. And there have been really nice dialogue in this commission associated with, you know, is there going to be landscaping around it? Is it going to be on all day? Can we turn it off at 9 o'clock as opposed to 11 o'clock? The flashiness of the sign. And I know that is on page 4, you have a bullet point there actually highlighting some of those petitions and the discussions that we have had around them. I think, you know, we can certainly look there for examples on guidelines that we may be interested in. I think those are the only specific ones, comments that I had. I will be more than happy to engage in other conversations as the discussion goes along. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Klein?
Well, generally speaking, I don't like things that are too restrictive, but I also don't like signs very much. I think we can get too many signs, so I'm just curious, we're talking about increasing the size allowed for signs under gas station canopies. Generally, I guess I want to hear some evidence as to why we want to increase the size of a sign, and the number of allowed signs from 2 to 3. You know, you go through the country and sometimes too many signs are not very attractive or helpful. So maybe that I'll be convinced of that, but that's one thing that I'm concerned about, is the signs. That was the only thing that jumped out at me, general feeling about signs. I don't think 3 signs are going to attract any more business to, any more traffic to a business than 2 signs.
I'm trying to, is there any restriction on the number of signs given the size of the gas station or not?
It's, for the canopy signs on the canopy is different than the signs on the building where the convenience store is. So the canopy signs are restricted to the 10 square feet and only 2. So in that case, I think it was that or the mobile had, I mean, their minimum standard they had for the smallest sign they could do was just couldn't get down to 10. So, and with the size, I mean, if they put it on, if you got 4 sides of the canopy, 3, you can't really see 2 at one time almost, unless you're in certain locations. So this was just kind of something that came up that I think going from 2 to 3 is not gonna make a site look, you know, stick out. I mean, when he's talking a couple square feet, I think it was just something addressing something we saw that a little more pro-business, but at the same time is not gonna hurt our sign regs or how businesses look in terms of the number of signs. So, because we do allow the wall signs on, there's no restriction on the number. You can have 1 per elevation of a commercial building with a size restriction, which is 1 times the frontage, which is pretty restrictive. I think most communities are probably a little bit higher than that. So, yeah, we can bring up the example or show when we get to that of what we're talking about, but I think it was this response to that, but it's different. The regulations for the store is different from the canopy. So
I do understand. I mean, the canopy is, for all practical purposes, a 3-sided billboard, and if you can only
Yeah.
put a sign on 2 sides of it, it doesn't make
and
much
12
sense.
square feet is pretty small. So
Well, and we do have to consider too that, you know, for a mobile station or a chain or a Casey's or something, they manufacture these to go in and be set up. So I don't think we can necessarily dictate that they're going to be forced to make a custom one for that particular size. I mean, if it's within reason, I don't think that makes any
They
difference.
That
make
was
a
the
lot of
case.
custom signs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do.
yeah,
I've seen, but I think the one that came to mind with canopies was not mobile, but Casey's, because that one was on 2, that had 2 street frontages, and the way that canopy was angled, you know, they really did need 3 sides of it to be
and
seen
in the
from.
plan development, we did approve 3 signs
Right.
for that, and that went through the process. And
Right, because you've got it coming from the east, from the west, and from the south.
yeah,
But
Well, and
that's such
actually
a,
from the north, too.
but that is such a specific instance.
Yeah.
I guess the question, and reflecting a bit on what Mr. Klein said, is the question is how can we write it on the code such that we accept and understand that specific instance without allowing every other gas station to put 3 signs or,
yeah.
I'm sorry, big signs and stuff like that. And again, I don't know the answer. I guess it's part of the challenge that we have.
I don't have any further comments, but,
You know, for a small neighborhood gas station, 10 square feet is a pretty big sign.
good size, yeah.
On the other hand, I agree, out at Casey's Way, maybe it wouldn't be so conspicuous.
So I encourage you.
I'm looking forward to the sign discussion. so
Yeah, I was just
that's
gonna say, I
my personal-
encourage you to think, you know, use the information Dan provided and pay attention to signs in your daily travels, you know, between now and the next time we talk about it, because this content neutral thing really gets into the temporary signs. And, you know, we don't get a lot of sign enforcement complaints. We have a few people that focus on that and have concerns about that, and we're going to talk about that. But when you look at temporary sign, which is where we get most of our complaints, almost all of them are content-based signs. Because a real
Can you give an
estate sign,
example?
a real estate sign is a content-based sign. You know, we say that if you are selling real estate, it can be, you know, 4 by 3 in a residential district, or, you know, so you can't restrict the size and location of a sign based on the fact that it's a real estate sign. You can't restrict the size and location of a sign because it's a community event sign for a church, you know, talking about their chili supper. And those are some of the off-premise signs that we allow versus the fact that we don't allow an off-premise sign for a developer for, you know, selling homes.
A sale.
And in some cases, you get into First Amendment arguments, too.
Right,
That was the core of the case, yeah, the Supreme Court case, so.
right. So, you know, part of the discussion I know I've had with some of the elected officials and some other people that are following some of this is, well, maybe we just need to make our temporary signs more permissive, you know, and not make them so they're violation. So why do we care if, you know, somebody wants to put up a banner? Do we just say it's permitted and let them put them up for a certain period of time, or until they become tattered or a nuisance or they fall over? It is a hard, it's a hard, and there's, you know, varying interpretations. Various people, depending on who you talk to, some like a lot of signs. Obviously the businesses do, they want as much signage as you'll give them. Most people don't care, but then there are people, you know, that have serious concerns about too much signing. It's clutter. You know, what happens if everybody puts a digital sign down Sycamore Road?
Could get tacky.
Yeah, it gets real Vegas tacky looking. So how do you know, what standards do you pick to allow it for? Maybe only parcels that are 5 acres or more, or maybe only, you know, I don't know, pick. So when you're driving around, think about what it would be like, you know, for different categories of signs if you're driving down Sycamore Road.
I was amused during the last campaign. For example, one area, the same candidate had about 15 signs in a one-block area. Is that going to convince any more people to vote for that candidate than one sign would have? And same with commercial things. I mean, once you know that the business is there and what it's doing, you don't need to be told 16 times from, that's an exaggeration, but you don't need to be told over and over again that they're there.
So, yeah, and we include the Town of Gilbert, their ordinance they did do after, so, you know.
Good reading.
It's kind of long, but it's good set up in terms of the structure of it, in terms of, you know, nothing with content. It's all based on the zoning districts and then restrictions on size and visibility, public safety, and things like that. So it's a pretty well-constructed ordinance. So
part of the impetus too for, you know, getting the sign code up to the Supreme Court standard is that once it's in place, it is the City Council's intent and direction that we will do more enforcement. So part of the whole process will include getting the regulations the way that we want them. We will spend some time educating the business community and the residential community about what the revisions are, what you can and can't do, and what you need to do to get permits, what the consequences are if you don't get permits. Because, you know, again, moving forward, we want to be able to enforce the code that we're putting on the books.
And then I assume that also includes some type of an analysis of who we would have to grandfather in. I mean, I'm sure that something is going to fall out of the realms of the new restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there'll be some non-conforming restrictions in there in terms of signs that are not in compliance with the new regulations, and how those, you know, when they can stay, and when do they have to be resolved.
Based on the length of the business, the occupancy, next owner, et cetera, et cetera.
We have the non-conforming regulations already, but that's more for the buildings and the use. And for signs, yeah, there needs to be language regarding how those are addressed.
Temporary signs, that won't be much of an issue.
Yeah. And the permanent signs, more than likely, it's usually they stay up until they fall down.
And then they go back up again.
Temporary signs are a little easier to have a time limit. They're temporary. They're not meant to be up a long time.
And when you make your code more permissive, then you're not creating nonconformities. But if you make it more permissive and then decide later that you don't like it, and then you try to regulate it back out again, then you've got nonconforming issues that are going to be there for a very long time.
Well, and I think one way you could possibly control that too is the amount based on the property. I mean, you can only, you know, 5 per acre or 5 per whatever the case may be of a given size, because, again, I mean, politics being what it is, it's going to get littered during, seasons like that, but those are temporary to a certain degree. But, I mean, if somebody wanted to put 500 in their front yard, I mean, obviously the way to restrict that is to say you have X per, square meter or something.
Yeah. And we do have quite a host of, particularly in commercial areas, ground signs, because the max height is 10 feet. So we do have a host of signs out there that do exceed that, so they're non-conforming currently and been that way for a while, and they can't expand the size, or they can't, add the square footage of it. So there are restrictions on we don't want it to have the extended life of the sign, so there's a lot of restrictions on it currently. So but there's a host of them out there right now that are too tall or too large in size, that can continue, but eventually over time they will need to be replaced and with a new sign that doesn't meet the ordinance. So,
So, given the fact that this goes through us before it goes through City Council, will we have an opportunity to maybe understand what City Council is looking for also prior to us making any decisions?
Yeah, the council will have the discussion in January, then we'll work with language from that discussion on this one and we'll probably come back prior to the hearing and have a discussion with the commission and, of course, with the business community and residents, and before we actually set a hearing. But so, yeah, definitely you'll understand what their comments are.
Yeah, I certainly think if anything, this is one that, we should be working conjointly on to get.
Council has asked for kind of this general broad, especially the court case. We're going to go through that in pretty clear detail with them. Some of the things that we hear and problems that we're aware of at their January 28th Committee of the Whole.
Okay.
So tune in that night and kind of watch that, and that's, we'll summarize that and bring that to your meeting as well.
Okay. Anybody have anything else in this?
Well, thanks. Yeah.
No? Okay.
Thank you.
Reports?
Next meeting, December 19th. We have 3 public hearings. Just briefly, Northland Plaza. It's where the Panera Bread is and the former JCPenney and Carson's. That shopping center, amending their use list just to make it a little more clear of what uses are permitted and special uses out there in terms of the commercial. Also, they will be requesting additional ground sign. There was a plan development approved for that project there. So they'll be amending that to allow additional ground sign on Sycamore Road, and also doing a plat of re-subdivision for one of the tenants that's proposed to go out there. Also a hearing for the DeKalb County Nursing Home on Annie Glen. They're doing an expansion out there. So they need to amend the ordinance that approved that site and that plan. And also a special use permit for vehicle repair facility on 1806 Sycamore Road. That's out there behind the Dairy Queen. There was a former oil change place out there that's been vacant for some time, and that type of use is a special use now in that general commercial district. So 3 hearings. In terms of attendance, I do know that David and Max will not be there, so I'll make sure the other members, we want to make sure we have a quorum on that, so I'll be in touch with the others. So always keep me updated in terms of your absence. You've been very good on that. So past meeting, the council on November 13th, they did approve a couple items. The commission reviewed the Fant re-subdivisions, a special use permit for the subdividing of the duplexes. Both of those are approved, and also the amendments to Cornerstone and Plaza DeKalb with the use list, kind of expanding that, the service uses. That was approved, both of those first and second reading at their November 13th meeting. That's all I had. Jim, anything?
Merry Christmas. Well, I guess we'll see you one more time.
Yeah, one more time.
I have one quick question.
Sure.
I did see this. Could you remind me how often we have to do the OMA training?
Oh, yeah. Mine's not marked on there.
Yeah, we did. I do have yours. We'll get that corrected, Max. Yeah, I do have that certificate. I'll have to check with our deputy clerk on the timing. I don't know if it's annually or...
I've not had to do it in a long time.
I want to say it was every 2 years. I want to say it was every 2 years, if I remember.
Some of these are a few years.
How many?
I thought it was every 2 years.
Okay.
Every year? Oh, okay.
Every year?
I knew it was
I've never
fairly
asked.
frequent.
Yeah.
So I am overdue?
I guess I'm way overdue.
We'll check on that.
Find out for
and-
that. Good question to ask. Who asked that?
So you'll get back to us?
We'll get back to you
on
on if
the-
you need
Yeah,
to do
'cause
that
I think
again or
I
not.
actually asked Ruth last year. and
Guess we
She
know
said
what
I
you're
had it
doing this
done.
weekend.
I just got done with my state ethics training, so I should be
I know.
good anyway.
Oh, yeah. I hear about that.
Yeah. Anything else?
That's all.
No? Okay, for those who won't be at the next meeting, happy holidays and have a safe travels
next
if you're
meeting?
traveling or whatever you're doing. And I'll see you next meeting, I hope, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
So moved by
Second.
Klein, second by Castro. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.